Spencer Kiefer, Shayla Miller, Shannon Lockley, Abby Bell, and Rhianna Colwell. Rhianna Colwell, I'm sorry. Where's there, Ms. Dalton?
Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Some odd years ago, 13 small and separate colonies banded together their families and their fortunes to shed the tyrannies of an oppressive government and these United States were born. And since that time, we have sent our best and our brightest to fight and die, defending us and our allies all across this globe. They have fought in the fields of, is that for me? They have fought in the fields of Europe and in the deserts of Africa. They have fought in the depths of the Atlantic and across every sky, but never as the aggressor. And once vanquished by our blood and treasure, we have never subjugated or beaten enemy. But in fact, we have sent our bricks and our bread to rebuild devastated nations, everywhere from Germany to Afghanistan. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the sequel has come to our shores. It is a malignancy that has permeated our government with cancerous tentacles. This evil is called liberalism. Liberalism takes from the producers and gives to the slothful. It taxes wealth in the name of equality. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it seeks to disarm you and me in the name of public safety. Now, tonight you're going to hear from three speakers. First, Chinn with the Flying Brass Firearms Training. He's going to talk to us about stories of ordinary men and women across this country who defend themselves every day from the criminal element. Stories that you won't hear from Dan Rather or Matt Lauer. Then we're going to hear from not only Butte County Sheriff Jerry Smith, but also Under Sheriff Kory Honea regarding the Second Amendment and laws that are rapidly coming upon us that will, in fact, infringe on our Second Amendment laws or rights. And at the end of the evening, we want you to not just be entertained and educated, we want you to be inspired. We want you to leave with this message tonight and every night that reportedly roughly 30% of conservatives in this country did not vote in 2012. And what we want you to remember is that, or the question we're going to ask you tonight and every night is, what are you willing to do about that? That's why there's a Tea Party. That's why we're here.
I love that guy. Before I start the presentation, let me speak to those of you who are in the audience who are pissed off. If there are 150 people in this room, 45 of you did not vote. You sat around with your buddies, you were mad about the matter, you griped to the old lady, and you didn't vote. And if you want to change anything in this country, register and vote or shut up. That was the nice part of my presentation. And vote on. conscience. Our greatest leaders have stepped forward to answer this question without being asked to do so. Thank you, Sheriff Smith, for sharing with me. And those who didn't step up immediately have stepped forward courageously and without hesitation. Thank you, Councilman Baldwin. These are the men and the women who will protect our rights. These are the men and the women who deserve our support. And the question is, will you stand and defend the Constitution and our right to bear arms? If they can't answer that question, we're in trouble. For over 200 years, the Constitution of this country has been our contract with the government that will protect us against government intrusion. We should be able to take comfort in that protection as citizens of this country. But current events tell us that perhaps we cannot. We're told the Second Amendment does not really mean what it says. With all due respect, Sheriff. The opposition would have us rewrite the Second Amendment to reflect the evolution of our society. We support a strict construction of the Constitution. It's that simple. The preamble to the Bill of Rights provides the conventions of a number of the states having the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, the further declaratory restrictive clauses should be added in order to prevent misconstruction and abuse of its powers. The Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, being necessary to the security of a free state. The Second Amendment is brief in its content, and it's simple in its language and direct in its meaning, in order to prevent misconstruction. Those of us who clearly see the purpose and intent of the Second Amendment are cast as radicals today. We're in trouble. Every time they talk about someone who owns a gun, we're radical, right-wing, conservative Christian gun owners. The freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution now hang in the balance. The defense of our family, our homes is at stake, and now is the time. Now is the time for each and every one of you in this room to stand up and be heard. Now is the time for each and every one of you in this room to make your presence known. Now is the time to make your vote count. If the gun laws that are presently that are being proposed in state legislature pass, it is because we failed to stand up. It is because we failed to vote, we failed to act. And tonight, we ask that you begin contacting your elected officials. Now. We ask that you send them a message. A message that is brief and simple as the Second Amendment. And it is this: remind them that they were elected to represent you and your family. Remind them they swore an oath to defend the Constitution. And if they do not, remind them you will never vote for them again. Never again. Do not give anyone a second chance that refuses to defend you. If you're interested in a contact list for every elected official in County Paradise, Butte County,
Nick is our vice chair. Ben Duke is our member at large. He is also our attorney that keeps Fred and I out of prison. We're going to go into special reports, Mr. Baldwin.
Hi guys, I'm a little overwhelmed here. Fortunately, they put the hillbilly up first and you get the important stuff later. So this is going to be real quick. We're not going to do a whole lot of business tonight. We did want you to know that on March 12th, we did present our Second Amendment resolution to Town Council. Greg Boland, the very next morning, put it on the agenda. And Mr. Rawlings, Councilman Rawlings, co-sponsored it the very next day. So it will be on the agenda for discussion and a vote. And we really look forward to that. So, Mr. Boland, by the way, I'm going to embarrass him, but I believe that he canceled the vacation to make sure he was going to be here for that vote. Let's see. On March 19th, we gave a presentation to the Planning Commission. They put on their agenda to discuss the tree ordinance. Well, to us, that's pretty much a property rights issue. This is the kind of thing that hits us in our wallets, you know, when we need to get permits, committees that tell us when and where we can do what with our own property. So, Planning Commission did a 5-0 vote, they did a lot of discussion, and they said they wanted to present this to Town Council for discussion, and hopefully, in the interest of property rights, suspend the tree ordinance. So we'll see if that hasn't been put on the agenda yet. We hope it will be for the next meeting, and we'll just see how that goes.
What a fantastic showing. This is fabulous. Good evening. Thanks for being here. I'm the owner and senior instructor for Flying Brass LLC. Thank you. Many people don't hear my voice. We train and qualify people for the safe, responsible, and effective use of firearms. Been around firearms all my life. My dad was an old gun trader. Never coming in, never going out. Taught them. I started shooting when I was about 4 years old. Been shooting pretty much all my 70 years of life. Love it. I've shot in sport, recreation, competition, and self-defense. Been there. I've been in the Marine Corps, proudly served in the United States Marine Corps. I've also served in the United States Army Special Forces, 12 Special Forces Group Airport. I'm going to start with a question tonight. Please, don't feel embarrassed or offended at this question. It actually has a different reason you might suspect. I would like to ask this audience by a show of hands, how many of you out here are either anti-gun or just sitting on the fence, haven't made it to mine? Please, don't be embarrassed. Raise your hand for me. Now you see the problem. We're preaching to the choir. You know, that's all we're doing. At the gun shows, at the gun clubs, at the range, across the table with a couple guys drinking coffee. I'm not drinking, so that's the problem we have. We're not getting our message out there. Those of you, though, that did not raise your hand because you don't want to be the one only person out there, I want to thank you for being here, though. And you know in your hearts who you are. Thank you. Because you came here willing to listen. We might not be able to change your mind. That probably won't. But at least you've shown the willingness to come and listen to the other side. Same courtesy I would gladly extend to you, if you have facts. Talking with a gentleman the other day, my wife can attest to, I talk about guns constantly, even in my sleep. And I will engage anybody in a conversation about firearms. Talking to this gentleman, and he says to me, I don't know why anybody would need 30 rounds in a firearm. Rather than usually, but I go, well, I don't understand why you want a Corvette that does 175 miles an hour. people. And he goes, oh, I should have said that. That's exactly, I said, the difference is the firearm affects me. The Corvette affects you. And do you believe that a government that has the power to restrict the amount of ammunition you have in a magazine in the name of safety could not also restrict how fast your Corvette's going to go in the name of safety? How would you like to have a 45-mile-an-hour Corvette? You don't think that can happen? How naive can you be? You give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. They already took quite a bit. Another question for you folks. Again, we'll show. I love that in people questions. That way I don't talk with them. Think about this. In Benji, how many people do you know personally, not the media, not the newspaper, how many people do you know personally have been killed and or injured with a firearm? Raise a hand, please. Any? 15? How many people out here have known personally someone who has been killed and or injured in an automobile accident? Ho, 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 ho! And yet the guns are back! And every one of you will leave tonight, get in a car and drive home, not even think twice about it. Guess what, folks? You just fallen victim to the media. They just brainwash us all. Guns are terrible! There's a lot of information out there about firearm statistics. The problem is there's a lot of information out there. And how do you find the good, the bad, and the indifferent? I don't have an answer for that. I spent hours on the computer trying to figure it out. But I come up with a few generalities that seem to kind of fall close to what's going on. The United States government did a study. Oh, surprise, surprise. For 2011. And that study showed that between 108,000 and 23 million times a firearm is used to defend the life of a law-abiding citizen. Typical government, you have to span here of forever. Well, I kind of threw that one aside. I started doing some more research. I went to Florida State University. They have a firearm study. It's been ongoing for about 4 billion years. There's a doctor there who is a bit of an anti-gun person. So he was going to use the resources of Florida State University to prove how terrible guns were. To the man's credit, he was open-minded. He went in to get true information. His final summation of all the information he was able to gather was that on average, a firearm is used to defend the life of a law-abiding citizen 2.3 million times a year in this country. Quick math, that's once every 13.7 seconds. But now I mentioned stops are protected a lot. I didn't say about shooting, right? Because in 70% of all situations where a firearm is presented in the defense of a person's life, 70% no shots are fired. There's some kind of string between the muzzle and the guy's hand. He goes, whoa, not worth it. Down the road he goes. That'd be 911 real quick. Call these folks. There's another number out there though. Fatalities. Handgun fatality, and you're going to find it all over the place. The most extreme number I could find was 23,000 deaths per year attributable to handgun or firearm fatalities. And that is a terrible number. A terrible number. I'm not going to argue that point. What they don't tell you, though, is that 60% of all firearm fatalities are suicides. Suicide. They're going to kill themselves regardless. They don't need a firearm, you don't butcher knife, or they're going to take pills. So we've got to disregard that. I'm sorry, we're going to have to. So that leaves about 40% of the 23,000. Oh, that's still a terrible number. Except for one little fact they always forget to tell you. 50% of all homicides are justifiable homicides. Law enforcement officers killing bad guys. Good guys killing bad guys. If you do the math, it comes out for every person killed for the 23,000, there are 100 lives saved. And Obama's own words, we need what we can do to save one life. Well, how about 2.3 million lives? That's what we're really looking at. Not one life, 2.3 million. The solution. I have the solution. Let's get rid of the guns. Right? Except for one little fact. Do you really think the drug dealers and the gang bangers want to turn their guns in? It's not going to happen. It didn't happen in Australia, where when they turned their guns, that homicide went up 600%. And we don't even want to talk about Germany. And every other country that has lost its rights to protect itself. Every single study has proven that when there's a decrease in guns, there's an increase in crime. Period. And for every increase in guns, there is a decrease in crime. Period. I mean, what idiot is going to go into a McDonald's to hold up and 35 people are sitting there all carrying concealed? They're not that stupid. Well, yeah, never mind. So why aren't we informed? Why aren't we informed of this information? I mean, if it's out there for me to get, then it should be out there in all the papers and on the TV and everything else, right? Well, for whatever reason, and I'm not going to go with this, because that will be another whole 3-hour speech. I've got to keep this at 4. I'll let you let some of your own thoughts on that, as to why you're not informed. I'm going to tell you right now, the media does not want any pro-gun facts. And you can read, hear, or see. Period. And I'm going to prove that locally right now with a story. July 24th, I went over to some friend's house. I've been invited to attend a meeting on Together Living Trust. Never been in the house before. As I walk up the walkway, the owner of 2 dogs came out of the house and attacked me. Unprovoked, they attacked me. There's a attack. One of the dogs ripped off the back of my left hand. It also ripped out all the scar tissue from a recently replaced shoulder. The other dog came around behind me and had me by the back of the right leg trying to pull me down. The dogs were trying to pull me down to kill me. They pull you down and they take out your jugular vein. I was screaming for help, trying to get somebody to come out there. Nobody would come out. So I shot him. I shot him in the head. My concern was shooting myself in the hand. I carry a legally possessed, legally concealed firearm. And I use it to defend my life. Well, I had to go to the hospital. They did the best they can to put me back together with what pieces were left. The homeowner contacted her insurance carrier. I mean, why should my insurance pay for her dog damage on me? I mean, that's not fair. I don't necessarily like insurance, but nonetheless, fair is fair. They refused to respond. They wanted to get back. She said, you should be paying him medical bills. They wouldn't respond. Finally, after many weeks, I have to get myself an attorney. So I get an attorney, and during the course of putting the case together, I go to the local newspaper. Anybody here representing them? I go to the local newspaper to get a copy of the police report that had been printed. I'm talking to the young lady across the counter, and she asked me what had happened. I told her. She said, you know, that might be interesting news. Great. So they brought a young man out, and he asked me what was the story. So I related the story again, same as I have to you, with a few more gory details. And he says to me, so what you're telling me is that you used a legally possessed, legally concealed firearm to defend your life. I said, yes. He said, not interested, and turned around and walked away. Had that been a child I shot, I'd be front page. This is the problem. The news isn't getting out there. We don't know about these things taking place. What newspaper? It was a local one, the one I do not subscribe to. I like to hit him in the pocketbook real quick.
A very local one. Down the block.
Okay, how do we resolve this, guys? What do we do about it? We start to engage people in conversation. But before you do that, you get your facts straight. Now, I've given you a few of them up here. You can research them. They're all out there on the internet, which doesn't necessarily mean they're true. But I've also got some pretty reliable sources for this information. But get your facts straight first. Because these people tend to argue with emotions, and you don't want to get into that. So keep your facts straight and don't let yourself get pulled into an argument. Next trick is initiate conversations. Anybody here ever go shopping? Has there ever been a person in front of you or behind you? Or has there been a checkout clerk? Hey, there they are. They're their targets right there. I've gone to a restaurant, had a waiter or waitress. Have you ever sat in a waiting room at the doctor's office? Anybody? Yeah, right. This is a prime area to get our side of the story out. You know, sitting there, oh boy, my fingers just killed me today. Oh, really? What's wrong? Oh, I've been shooting trap all morning. I think I sprained my finger. It sounds ridiculous. They said, oh, you're a shooter? Yes. Well, I don't like guns. Well, any particular reason? Well, they kill people. So you don't like a lot of things. Yeah. Okay, see where I'm going with this? Engage, but have your facts up and going. Make sure you tell them right. Don't argue with them, and don't get emotional. We've got to get our side of the story out there. And the way we're going to do it, we're going to start talking to people. But guess what, folks? It starts here, it starts now, and it starts with you. Thank you.
You know, when I first met him, he didn't look that funny to me. I'll tell you what. I emailed the sheriff last week and I said, send me a bio for you and the other sheriff so I can introduce him to the people. He didn't do it, so I've had to ad-lib. So thank you for your understanding. Sheriff, which is going to have a review. Ladies and gentlemen, Under Sheriff Kory Honea is no Baryshnikov, but he is a very accomplished man in his own right. Under Sheriff Kory Honea.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate a little better. Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the introduction. Although I did provide you with a bio, you could have just read. But nonetheless, I tell you, actually, I came here tonight obviously to support the sheriff, because the sheriff has got some very definite and strong opinions about this issue, and he and I worked together ultimately to start addressing the concerns that the public had that has come about in recent months as a result of efforts on the part of a group of people to impose very restrictive gun control laws. And so in response to that, the sheriff put out a statement defining what his position was. And I have to tell you that I greatly respect that position. I work for the man, and I support that wholeheartedly. And from that standpoint, the sheriff and I talk a lot about this particular issue. And whenever there is a new law that's coming out or being proposed, it's something we talk about and try to research and certainly weigh in on to the degree that we can, either from the office of the sheriff himself or through the California State Sheriff's Association, if we're able to get their support. And in many respects, when something comes down or there's questions come out, the sheriff looks to me to do the research, because that's something that I enjoy doing, and I'm here to provide that support to him. But other than that, I didn't prepare any specific comments, so I'll just say this: I do appreciate everything that you're doing. I think it's important for us to get out and be engaged. It's important for good, honest, decent people who support constitutional rights to talk with each other and to, as I think Caleb said, which is very important, is to engage people. That's the only way that we're ultimately going to get the message out. So with that, I will turn it over to Sheriff Smith, and if during the course of his comments, if there's anything else that I can add, I'm sure that he'll look at it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sheriff Jerry Smith is a hardworking man. My understanding is he worked his way through college in Hollywood doing pedicures for the stars. It's been relayed to me that he was once said that Richard Dreyfuss has the cutest little feet. Ladies and gentlemen, New County Sheriff Jerry Smith.
really glad to be here, and the undersheriff didn't quite get the opportunity to tell you some of his accomplishments. I asked him to come to work for the office of the sheriff when I took the office about 3 years ago in some months. And the reason I did is because he's a very intelligent, intellectual individual. He's a self-taught attorney, and he does practice law. He's a special prosecutor with the district attorney's office. He's still very much referred to in our line of business. And having an attorney working directly, an at-will attorney working directly for the office of the sheriff is very handy to have. So we're going to actually ask Kory to come up and talk to you a little bit later about some specific case law that you're going to find interesting. Is there any press in the room at all? Is there any? Don't be shy. Oh, come on. There are some particular reporter, and I don't know if he writes for the local newspaper or if he freelances, and I don't even know what his name is. But he tends to write, well, recently he wrote an article about me that frankly was not very flattering, and I'm okay with that. His information is not correct, but I'm okay with that as well. But the reason that he gets to write that article, the reason that he gets to speak freely about people like myself and others, because he's protected by the First Amendment.
Right. That's right.
So when he writes that stuff, although it makes me anxious from time to time because his facts aren't straight, we will protect his right. We will protect his right because we are opposed to the Second Amendment. I will put my life on the line, put others in harm's way, and perhaps do that and protect myself with a weapon because of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know what that is, right? Keep in mind there's two parts to that. We're going to talk a little bit about that here in a short period of time. There are going to be two court decisions, one's called Heller and the other one's McDonald. The undersheriff's going to speak to you very specifically about helping you understand the difference between the militia and the right to bear arms. That preamble to the Second Amendment was very popular at the time that the Bill of Rights was actually authored, so we're not going to put a lot of significance in that. I'm going to tell you why in a few minutes. But first, let's talk a little bit about history. In, I believe it was 1689, King James II thought that it would be important to disarm the Protestants. And he also thought that he could do what he wanted to do without the authority of Parliament. He was afraid of being overthrown. He was Catholic, and a good majority of his constituency was converting to Protestant. So he figured the best way to keep from being overthrown was to disarm the Protestants. Well, he was overthrown, and he was overthrown by the Protestants. Specifically, there was William III and Mary II, who went about rearming the citizens of England. But unfortunately, they couldn't get the job done exactly like they wanted to. They thought that they would arm those folks that had property so that they could hunt game when game was in season. Realizing that that was not profitable for the people, they had to change their mind about that. I'll read you a little bit about that. I really won't. I'm going to bore you with some of this stuff, so I'm going to try to keep from doing that. Our experiences prior to the United States Constitution were interesting, right? We declared our independence, we fought our war against tyranny, and we won. But our country was in kind of a state of disarray. We were ruled, each state ruled themselves independently with articles of what they call the Confederate, meaning that Pennsylvania had a particular order where Maryland perhaps had something different. So when James Madison come together and they said, well, we're going to have a constitution, we're going to write a constitution, we're going to write a constitution so that we can kind of bring all of this stuff together. And part of the reasons they needed to do that was because there was no interstate arbitration process to handle quarrels between states. There was no sufficiently trained and armed interstate security forces to suppress insurrection, and there was no national militia to repel foreign invaders. So the two states came together and they decided, well, we need to figure out how we're going to do that. And we'll see you next year. Come tell us how you're going to do that. And the idea was spawned to develop a constitution, where we could bring all of the states together under one federal government. And it might be worthy of note that the early English settlers in America viewed the right to arms and the right to bear arms and have a state militia is not only for the purpose of repelling invaders, but they had other ideas too. They enabled people to organize a militia system. We'll talk about the militia in a few minutes. Participate in law enforcement. That's interesting. That's something that's important to me. And we'll talk about posse comitatus in a minute. Deterring tyrannical government. We did that. We did it again in 1812, by the way. And as a result of that, militia was engaged. And unfortunately, since they were not very well trained, they sacked Washington and burned the White House. We will talk about militia in a few minutes. Repelling invasion, suppressing insurrection, allegedly including slave revolt, and facilitate a natural right of self-defense. Now, when Madison's, nobody knows, really, truly, why his preamble was the militia side of it. He could have done any of these other things, but no one really knows. No one knows. Did he do it by eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or Moshiambo? Nobody really knows. But he chose the militia preamble. He could have said, so the sheriff could raise a posse. He could have said, so that we could put down a tyrannical government, but he didn't. So that's caused a lot of confusion over the years. But fortunately, in 2008, that confusion has been, for the most part, addressed, and now we have some very specific things that Dean and Sheriff are talking about that. Now, let me ask you, is the Constitution a moving, fluid document, or is it stable? Is it static? Is it stable? And how about the Bill of Rights? Same thing? Actually, that's not true. The reason it's not true is because frequently we've amended the Constitution of the United States. The Falstead Act, for instance, prohibition of alcohol. Was that Article 18, I believe? Then Article 21 of the Constitution did away with Article 18, right? So the Constitution is fluid. How many of you folks were voting in the year of 1969, for instance? Raise your hand, please. How old were you when you had the opportunity to vote? You were 21, right? We changed that in 1971, and we changed the Constitution of the United States of America to allow 18-year-olds to vote. Why did we do that? We figured if you were going to go to war, you ought to have the opportunity to vote. So one more time, the Constitution was changed. And we continually move on the Constitution. We add things and we take things away all the time. So in reality, it is a fluid document. Now, the Bill of Rights. When Madison decided, when they introduced the Constitution, Madison did not think that we needed a Bill of Rights. But the Federalists were so argumentative about this that he retracted that and said, you know, if we don't have a Bill of Rights, we're not going to get a Constitution ratified. That's how we ended up with our Bill of Rights. Some would argue that the first amendment of the Bill of Rights should maybe have been the second. Maybe the second should have been the first. You know, and I can argue that both ways. Now, when these people were gathering about, remember, it was several hundred years ago, there was a different mindset. There was this torturing memory of this tyrannical government. So they, in their minds, were thinking that we have to arm our people, make sure that they're armed, so that we can repel a standing army, an army that can be brought about by our government. And our forefathers believed, and I believe to this day, that you cannot disarm the people and not expect the people to not disarm the government. And I think that may soon occur, believe me. So we look back at where we have come from. We've come a long, long ways. Now, the Bill of Rights, it's not static either, is it? We constantly are looking at the Bill of Rights, and there's folks back in Washington in black robes. They're telling us how to interpret that. I'll give you an example of that. Miranda. Prior to Miranda, the Miranda decision in the early 1960s, when law enforcement were to interrogate somebody, we would get the LA County phone book out and just go over it. And I don't mean looking up addresses either, if you get what I'm doing. So we had people confessing to crimes that maybe they didn't need to confess to. So Miranda came along, and then all of a sudden we get a different interpretation of what it means by self-incrimination. constantly looking at that. And as attorneys, I know that as a criminal attorney, the sheriff, he'd give you a lot of information about that. The Second Amendment, the Second Amendment has been examined and examined and examined. In 1939, we took a pretty critical look at it, and we made some changes. But there was always that gig about the militia that people found irritating. Do we have firearms and possess firearms so that we can raise the militia? That's not practical anymore, is it? And again, the militia, that's kind of interesting. When, after the Bill of Rights was passed, you get a kick out of this. It wasn't a privilege to own a firearm. It was a mandate. You had to keep and bear arms. Let me find what I'm sure you'll find this interesting. It's fun. Not only was it a duty that you carry arms, but you were mandated so that we could raise a militia. Now, unfortunately, in, it was in 1792 or 3, a bunch of Pennsylvania farmers decided they didn't want to pay taxes. So we raised the militia. We raised about 700 men, but we needed 13, we raised 7,000, we needed 13,000. So they started drafting votes. And what they found was the militia was not armed. It wasn't armed properly, it wasn't regulated, and it wasn't trained. Even though that they had instructions by the government, here's the instruction. Each and every free-bodied, unfortunately, remember, put yourself back in time, this was during slavery, white male citizens of the respective states residents therein, who is or shall be of age of 18 years or under the age of 45, except as herein are accepted, and we'll talk about that, shall severally and respectively be enrolled in the militia. And every citizen so enrolled and notified shall within 6 months thereafter provide himself with a good musket or firelock, a sufficient bayonet and belt, 2 spare flints, and a knapsack, a pouch with a box therein to contain not less than 24 cartridges, I don't know, 24, suited to the bore of the musket and the firelock. Each cartridge to contain a proper quality and quantity of powder and ball, or with a good rifle, knapsack, shot pouch, and powder horn, 20 balls, suited to the bore of his rifle, and a quarter of a pound of powder, and shall appear so armed, accorded and provided, when called out to exercise or into any service, except that when called out on company days, that's training, to exercise only, you don't have to bring that stuff. If you were 18 years old, between 18 and 45, it was your civic duty to arm yourself, because you could be called upon at any time to support a militia effort. Fortunately, the militias kind of went by the wayside after the War of 1812. And again, they were poorly trained, they were not disciplined, they were not organized, and it became very well apparent that we needed to stand the army. Unfortunately, that was very expensive. But the reality is, when you arm yourself today, you're not arming yourself with a machine gun. You don't have a bazooka, you don't have a drone in your front yard. You have a firearm that's well suited for you individually to provide for your personal safety. I personally do not own an assault rifle. I don't have an AR-15. I have an 870 shotgun that's alongside my bedstand, and it's the same gun that I shoot pheasants with my good friend David. I don't need, I don't care that you have them, but I don't need that kind of armament. I worked for 35 years in the office of the sheriff. I was hired by Sheriff Eric Gillick at the time when I was just turned 20 years old. I joked that I wasn't old enough to drink, but I was doing car checks. For 11 years during that period of time, I went to, the majority of my experience in administration and in the counternarcotics. But there was an 11-year period that I never packed a sidearm when I worked. I had one at the ready, it was in the car, but I never packed a firearm. I wasn't, and still not, afraid to walk these beautiful streets. But however, then came along this man, and he said, boss, I feel a lot better if you pack a firearm. So I did. It's a little 5-shot J-frame revolver. And if I can't do what I need to do in 5 shots, I'm gonna throw it at whoever I need to and run out of hell. But I understand the need for you to possess firearms to protect yourself. I want you to do that. My wife asked me a couple days ago, when I told her I was coming up here, she said, should you bring security? I said, I don't think I'm gonna need it. And again, I'm very, very proud of the fact that to be able to represent you great folks. And if you have any questions, I'd be very well entertained to entertain questions. And I'm sure that somebody's got something out there. Greg Kiefer in the back there, he used to work for me. And it was always exciting to see what Greg was going to do. Some of the things that Greg did, the statutes of limitations, probably not ran out yet. Been fishing, Greg?
Every now and again.
Yeah, right.
Every now and again.
Somebody's got a question. Sure.
I've got a rifle since I was in the Army and it has never been registered. Is that a problem?
No. Any weapon that you purchased prior to handgun, that's the, when did we start doing background checks? When did we start doing background checks? If you have firearms that are not currently registered, I have a number of them myself. They're family heirlooms or weapons that I bought prior to the necessity of registering firearms, just no problem. Now, if you transfer that weapon to a family member, yes, you'll have to do the transfer.
Because I have an old rifle given to me. Son down, recent. So that's supposed to be registered.
If it's a recent transaction, yes. No, I don't think on long gun, no. No, not on long gun. Yeah, on a handgun perhaps, but on long gun, I don't think so.
That's a rifle.
Yeah, I don't think so. You know, gun legislation coming out of Washington. 2 months ago, I would have suggested to you that there's not a chance that was going to happen. Because I didn't think the president had the votes to do that. But he has since watered that down to the point where he might. Because what he's asking for now is background checks. That is no different than what we do in California. We've been doing background checks for years and years and years. We've had a ban on high-capacity magazines since the 1990s. So a lot of the stuff that you're hearing coming out of Washington, for the most part, mirrors what we're already doing in California. Now, am I in favor of gun legislation coming out of Washington? As the son of the Montana cattleman, Jerry Smith? No, I'm not. I think that we've got enough. I think once you start down that slippery slope, it's very difficult to come back. However, my goal is to keep weapons out of the hands of the felons, for instance, and people that are otherwise prohibited. And if we have to do a background check on those folks, that might be a way to help facilitate. Are you going to get them all? No, you're not. There'll be people slip through that. Will these people get firearms that are not registered? You bet they are. If somebody were to break into my house and break the gun safe open, they're going to have firearms. That happens all the time. So gun legislation coming out of Washington is going to be watered down, and he might get part of that passed. I wouldn't concern yourself so much about that. What concern yourself with is what's going on right here in the state of California. There is gun legislation being proposed right now that is quite alarming. Any of you folks out here target shoot? Great. When I say target shoot, do you match shoot? A lot of match guns have a thumb hole that you can support your hand, correct? If legislation gets passed, a particular piece of it gets passed, that will be considered an assault weapon because it has either a pistol grip on it or a thumb grip on it. Isn't that crazy? Your 10-22 that you shoot down and you shoot at steel with, it has a thumb hole stock on it, that could be considered an assault weapon. He disabled him, his mother provided him with assault weapons and gave him ammunition and showed him how to use those. Now that should be a crime. If you want gun legislation, let's up the ante on that end of it. If you sell a gun and you know that you're selling it to a felon, let's up the ante on that side. Let's make that a crime that we can hold you accountable for. If you buy a gun from a stranger or you steal a gun in your possession, you're a felon, let's up that end. Let's spend more time and energy at that end and not at the front end. Let's do it at the back end. So, the answer to the gentleman's question here, if you pass the law, I took an oath to support you in the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. If you pass that law, I have to enforce it. If it's state law.
Doesn't state law have an equivalent of the Second Amendment in the state also? And if our legislators go against that, what is our recourse except millions of dollars to
Vote them out.
screwed up court system?
Vote them out.
No, we gotta rebel.
The undersheriff's going to talk to you a little bit about McDonald, right? You're absolutely right. There's a certain case that says that the states can't infringe no more than the government can, and that's a case called McDonald.
You were saying that if we vote any which way we do, your job is to protect us and our votes. And yet, twice California, just for instance, has voted down gay marriage. And yet now, the government's about to say, too bad. Against the will of the people. What if they
Yeah, I'm not so sure that the government's going to do that.
I hope they don't, but what if they find themselves in the same position, but this time about our Second Amendment?
Honestly, I don't believe that the government is. You start down a slippery slope, don't you? And I don't care where you start. If you start on backgrounds or you start registration processes, that's the slippery slope. Very difficult to come back. So as the son of a Montana cattleman, I'm against gun regulation. As your sheriff, we got to be real careful about the battles we fight and which hill we choose to climb. Was there any question over here?
Sheriff, in the interest of time, you could be more minutes after we're done. Can we hold the questions till in the audience?
Sure.
Did you want to?
I would like the undersheriff to come up and speak to you about two cases of particular importance to you. One's called Heller versus Washington, the other one's called McDonald.
If you had a constituent or a fellow sheriff that was sitting on the fence about this issue, what would you say to him?
You know, we meet as a sheriff's association often. We're going to meet, matter of fact, the week after next in Santa Cruz. Remember, there's a lot of sheriffs that are from urban areas, like Alameda County Sheriff, for instance, Greg Ahern.
Right.
Greg's a great guy. Unfortunately, the city of Oakland is in his jurisdiction. That's the gun and knife capital of the world. He's getting a lot of pressure from his constituents to be not anti-gun, but to be on the fence. So understand there's a lot of sheriffs that are not rural sheriffs that have to support their constituency.
Gotcha.
Their constituency is saying, at the very least, would you be neutral? So what I would say to him is keep up the good work, Greg. You're an outstanding guy.